Okay, so getting into prompt number one. Prompt number one states, if you have a concept of God, describe it in detail. Who is God in your eyes? Why? Put your concept of God in dialogue with the Christian understanding of God as one who seeks to transform human living in the present toward greater and greater depths of unconditional love. So, for me, in my opinion, I don't really firmly believe in God, but I do think God is because I don't believe in him, I believe God is an idea of it's an idea that people can believe in that makes them a better person. Because most people that do believe in God do end up being very nice people, I believe. And but even though I don't believe in God necessarily, or the Catholic version of God, I do believe in things that come with believing in God. So, I do believe in something after death, and most Catholics call that the kingdom or heaven. So, John the Baptist wrote, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near." So that was in page 21, chapter 3 of Harrington's Jesus. And it's in the chapter of Jesus in the Kingdom. And most of the Bible descriptions describe as heaven, but to me, I don't necessarily believe in heaven as a place. In my opinion, I don't think it's like a certain place people go. I think heaven is more of like a state of being, and heaven is different for every person. Because many people have the different ideals, perfect lives, and to me, I think that's where people go after they pass away, is heaven. And to me, that's the biggest thing, to where I don't perfectly believe in the concept of Jesus Christ and God per se, but I do believe there's something after life, and that has to come with some sort of God. So I don't know exactly what I believe in. So with that, we're going to move into prompt number 2. And prompt number 2 says, describe several obstacles to development in prayer according to Green in Experiencing God. So first of all, we need to get a basis of what prayer is. And Green states that prayer is growth and prayer is life. On page 39, at the beginning of part 2, kind of in the intro paragraphs. And so kind of what I get from that is prayer is a process, and most times processes are not perfect. So there's going to be complications, and there's going to be things to overcome with that prayer, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about, is those obstacles and those challenges into completing the process. Because Green describes prayer as a process, and I believe that it is also a process, because he had laid out the steps, and it had seemed to have a goal at the end. So one of the main challenges, I believe, is connecting with God on a personal level. Basically, I think that gaining the trust of God is a very hard thing for people to do, especially at the beginning, because Green describes it as from he, or the way you talk about God is how you, it's kind of like your trust level, if that makes sense. Going from he, because he describes the way people talk about the way people talk about God in the form of he, thou, and you. So going from he, meaning we don't know God personally, according to Green. To call God, and this is a direct quote from the book, to call God he implies that God is someone who exists, I believe in, or someone who exists I believe in, but is someone with whom I don't have a direct personal experience. That was on page 41 from the chapter He and Thou of part 2, I believe. So, Green described it as people don't believe that God directly affects their life, and with certain things happening in life, it's easy to put blame on other things, and it's hard for people to just say like, oh, God has this plan for me. But I think that's hard for people to trust that and firmly believe in that. And I think this is the hardest part of prayer, because in trusting, you have to know yourself and you have to know the person you're trusting. So you have to know God and you have to know yourself personally before you can actually, gain a full trusting bond between there. In Green's book, Stage 2 is about experiencing God. And this is another very large challenge for people, is getting out of Stage 2 of prayer, according to Green. So Green has 3 stages of prayer. The first is like learning who God is. The second is, this is a direct quote, in the second stage the focus is more on experiencing God, which is on page 51 from the 3 stages of growth. And the third stage, I believe, is like learning to love God, and just learning to love God and like what He does. And according to Green, leaving stage 2 is, in his opinion, the biggest obstacle in prayer, because he believes a lot of people stay in this stage for almost all of their life. He even said that some people spend 50 years. And so what I get from that is, personally, I think most of the struggle comes from accepting growth, because we are habitual creatures, and with growth comes change. And a lot of people, I think, have a hard time changing things and accepting change. So I believe that it's very hard to accept this whole kind of like change in your beliefs in order to gain that trust from God that we talked about earlier, which is, I think, very hard for people to accept, because change, like I said, is for most people a very hard thing to accept, because we are very habitual creatures and we like our habits. So I believe, in Green's eyes, getting out of stage 2 is one of the hardest things for people to do. And he said that most people, I believe, get out of stage 2 and then they end up in stage 3, which they often live a long time as well, because that's kind of the end goal of stage 3. So most of the process occurs in stage 2, so I think that's why the biggest challenge is getting out of stage 2 into that stage 3, to where you start to love others the way God would love you. And thank you. That will be the conclusion of my video.